Hey everyone, I am excited to do another show with you guys. Welcome to the Ministry of Common Sense. Listen, I just want to say thank you to a secret person out there which sent me a gift. I just received it today. Here's my gift. Now, what's crazy about this gift is I don't know who it's from, but look at this. I'm opening this and there's a little box here, right? And now I'm opening the little box, and inside the box, there's a little picture of me holding my book. And then there is a little piece of message to me in here, and it says, congratulations with your common sense, may God be with you. And then it has chocolate in gold because they're wishing me good luck. Isn't that sweet? So whoever sent that gift to me, thank you from my bottom heart. This is crazy that you're doing this stuff here. Coming straight from Paris. I mean, what more can you ask for? Chocolate from Paris. Listen, I just want to say that today is very special to me. I just met my sibling, my sister, someone which I'm soulmate with, and I had no idea until recently, and I'll tell you more about that in a second. But here's a couple of thoughts for you. Inc. magazine wrote recently that creativity is thriving in these times of COVID-19. In contrast, in fact, I think exactly the opposite is the case. Creativity is collapsing in this coronavirus beset world. This first dawned on me when I spoke with a friend of mine. Now, this friend of mine, he's the Chief Global Officer for Marketing at Burger King, Fernando Machado. And he's known for a couple of commercials I just want to play for you right now.
A difference a day made. What a difference a day made. I know in my heart the difference is you.
Now, this very well-known commercial which we're running on Super Bowl just recently with, Andy Warhol, was actually originally produced many, many years ago, and his research team managed to get hold of it. Now, what an amazing research work. Now, here's the story about Fernando. Fernando, in fact, told me that nearly everyone he knows in the creative field is on a breaking point right now. Most member of creative teams, he told me, see psychologists on a regular basis. They're simply losing their creativity in a time when travel is a memory and long-winded meetings at the office has disappeared, and we have more time than ever at home in front of this screen. So why is creativity taking a plunge? Well, nearly 3 decades ago, while working with Lego, I conducted a highly unusual experiment. The experiment was not only to understand creativity, but also to understand how those new things called Donkey Kong handheld gaming devices, I mean, this is back in the 80s, okay, were impacting kids' creativity level. And here's what we learned. Lego's destiny was in play, so to speak, as they actually witnessed that the cells were completely cannibalized by this new craze. And one of the things we did was to analyze kids' ability to twirl a little pen between their fingers. And what I found so scary with this particular experiment was that kids, for sure, back in the days, were really, really good at doing this. And suddenly something unusual happened. In fact, they started to drop the pen after just 2 years into the arrival of the Donkey Kongs. And in fact, what has happened ever since is that kids have become worse and worse at using their fingers. And this is really, very profound for me because the simple motor skills were really disappearing. And as kids players move from a playground to the screen, creativity, in my opinion, has drained from preteens' brains. Now, as time went by, working with creative teams across the world, I noticed that in certain situations, creativity actually seems to thrive on a screen. But also I have to say, in other situations, it seems like someone has just pressed this writer's block one for all and it's gone. So very intrigued by this, I began to map my own creativity levels, the good days And I guess along with the bad days, right? And creativity moments, sometimes were really high and sometimes were low. And here's what I discovered. I discovered that whenever I was near a screen or any screen-based environment, often I was forced into a linear way of thinking. It's almost like we were spoon-fed with information, with more and more, with less and less, I would say, pauses and time for reflection, right? And I remember that those pauses, in fact, were really what was generating my sense of creativity back in the days. But for some reason, it was just completely gone. So I started to put in these pauses in everything I wanted to do, and suddenly creativity came back again. So here's the first thing I learned. Screen-based environments kill creativity, but they also somewhat dilute empathy. And it's a topic very close to my heart, and also to the heart, I think, of today's guest. But wait, there's more. As many of you out there know, I fundamentally believe that there is a correlation between common sense and empathy. Remember, my new book, The Ministry of Common Sense, is all about that. Common sense, remember, is seeing things as they are and doing things as they ought to be done. I said in another way, to treat customers and employees as they themselves would expect to be treated. And empathy, well, that is the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from within their frame of reference. That is the capacity to place oneself in another's position. Now, one of the things I'd like to talk to today's guest about is our shared view about empathy in this period, because I think we both have the view of that it's at an all-time low. In fact, I'll claim we both believe that empathy is in an existential crisis. So you may say, what is this person all about? Well, I'm going to tell you in a second. But before I tell you about this, I just want to say that the reason why empathy for me is so important to discuss today is because I fundamentally believe that human beings were born and raised around the concept of empathy. Our brain has, in contrast with any other mammals, evolved and developed for the right, what we call supramarginal gyrus. That's an area of part of the cerebral cortex. This is where empathy lives. But a recent study from the University of Michigan actually shows, and this is, by the way, conducted with 14,000 students over 30 years until 2010, that the degree of empathy has dropped some 48%, which is scary, over the past decade alone. Is this the beginning of our downfall as human beings, as technology increasingly eats into our creativity and into our cerebral context? I couldn't think of anyone better to discuss this with than Erica Dhawan. She is the world's most foremost expert in modern day collaboration and what she calls connectional intelligence. She's the author of best-selling books, Get Big Things Done, named #1 on what corporate America is reading. And May this year, she's out with a new book she just told me, which I can't wait to read, which is Digital Body Language, How to Build Trust and Connection No Matter the Distance. Now, she's also named Thinkers 50 Radar list and selected as one of World Economic Forum's Young Global Shapers. If this isn't enough, Erica has an MPA from Harvard Kennedy School, an MBA from MIT, and a BS in economic from the Wharton School. You need to be very soda in order to say all these letters here, I have to say, Erica. Actually, there's so much I wanted to talk to you about, so it's not even funny. But before I do that, let me just start by showing you a little video about Erica and her views about certain topics.
The cerebral cortex.
And let me just share this with you.
We think we have communication and collaboration down, but we don't. The innumerable opportunities we have to send the wrong signal, to misunderstand each other, to create anxiety, has gone to an unprecedented level. And here's the contradiction that we're facing today when it comes to collaborating with purpose. 3/4 of face-to-face collaboration is nonverbal. It's our cues, it's our body language, it's the tone, the intonation we're sharing. But 70% of collaboration is virtual. We're on emails, conference calls, IMs. We're no longer face-to-face all the time. And so we have to work in this very different way. But what this has really created is a major empathy deficit. It's caused teams to misunderstand each other more quickly, to speak more freely, to argue more. There's actually specific science called the online disinhibition effect, which shows that people are much ruder and care less about others when they're behind a screen talking to them, right? Emails or texts versus face-to-face. And they walk away faster from relationships, from friendships, from informal relationships, from partnerships, from collaboration, and beyond. This has led to a major impact on teams. A recent Harvard Business Review study showed that the adverse effects of ineffective collaboration on teams can lead to innovative behaviors by falling by over 90%, trust declining by 80%, role and goal clarity falling by 75%, and organizational satisfaction and commitment falling by more than 50%. These numbers can seem pretty astronomical, but we all have seen the dysfunctional teams that arise when we're not effectively collaborating in intelligent ways. And so today is all about how do we move past this empathy deficit? How do we get rid of a lot of the misunderstanding, the confusion, to really, truly not have fake consensus building, but collaborate with purpose?
Erica, there is so much we have in common, except for one thing I had to admit, that is that you have a serious education and I have zero education. So here we go. But I have to say, first of all, welcome to my show.
Thank you so much, Martin. I am so excited about the Ministry of Common Sense. If you have not bought the book yet, make sure you buy it. Buy it for your boss, buy it for your friends, buy it for your children. We all need it.
Thank you. You make me blush. Really, I have to ask you one thing. You actually did this speech, I believe, in 2019. So that was before, but that was in the good old days before we had COVID-19, right? And then shit hit the fan and everything was amplified to the extreme degree. I know you're writing on a new book on this topic, but give me a sense of what have you learned since then? What has derailed and what has not? What are some of the new observations you made since then?
Yeah. So for the last 10 years, my guiding question has been, how do we lead effectively in a 21st century marketplace? A marketplace that is virtual, global, multi-generational matrix, where we need to connect across distances. And so it was really interesting for me to see that now that audience was not just a group of people that are in global corporations, for example, but anyone and everyone starting last March, because we are all working in a remote world. In terms of what I've learned, what I've discovered, what I've identified in the last year, almost a year or so since the pandemic started, is that number one, our ability to connect across distances in new and different ways has grown at an unprecedented level. So we've seen more in the last 10 months, we've seen more disruption, but yet more innovation than perhaps we've seen in the past 8 years in many industries. Leaders that were used to having control, having an assistant next to them, have been forced to give up that control and truly empower their teams to take ownership. Digital tools, collaboration tools like video technologies and others, chat tools that got little traction in organizations for years are now business requirements, not only for team productivity, but also for social connection, for celebration, for brainstorming and creativity and beyond. And I think the real question that I've noticed that we all have to ask ourselves is not just at this point, how will we adapt to this new normal that we've all been living in, but how will we use this moment to create a better normal and really reimagine work, reimagine the meaning of common sense, as Martin, you have pioneered us all to think about in our changed environment.
Beautifully said. I want to just share a little commercial for my new book. It's not because I want to push the book. Well, kind of it is, but it's also because I do know that what I'm saying is just down your alley. Take a look at this.
Okay, I'm ready for my PowerPoint presentation. Oh, I've cut it down. It's only 186 slides. TikTok. it'll only take 90 minutes.
Now, one of the things you are talking a lot about in your new book, which of course is not released yet, but this is a bit of a teaser, is the whole idea about how empathy is disappearing through this media, perhaps, or how we just don't know how to read each other's body language. Can you give me sort of some insights about that whole topic? Because I find it so fascinating.
Absolutely. And I'll start by saying, in many ways, what we've seen in the last year is a whole new set, and even before that, for anyone that's been working in digital communication, whether it's emails, conference calls, video calls, chats, you name it, is that there are many new signals and cues that are now replacing our physical body language when we can't be face to face. And the way that I define digital body language is it's the new signals and cues that make up the subtext of our messages. So everything from the choice of medium that we use. Did we choose to video call, text, email? Each of those choices are actually signaling to other people priority levels, urgency levels, complexity levels of information, and we make meaning out of those choices. Simple things like who's on the to line, who's on the CC line, are simple impressions that help us make meaning around who must respond, who's sort of in the political chain, at the seat of the table, just a listener. And how do we really think about those politics? And then on the video call, first impressions, those first 30 seconds, I like to say actually the first impression now in digital body language on a video call is the invite in the calendar. Did you have a good meeting title? Did you have an agenda? Are you being respectful of people's time? And when you come to the meeting, really coming thoughtfully, maybe not perhaps the same way where we experienced in your awesome video, Martin, so that we're respecting people's time. And I'd actually argue, Martin, that I think that we can grow empathy using digital body language in this time. We know that screens can reduce empathy, but I think that we as humans have the capacity to deepen empathy, and we can deepen empathy by changing our digital body language behaviors. For example, I like to say that reading messages carefully is the new art of listening. And writing clearly is the new art of empathy. And I'll give you an example. One of my clients mentioned his boss, Tom, and he'd always send text to his boss saying things like, do you want to speak Wednesday or Thursday? And Tom's response would be yes. That's a great example where Tom was lacking a common sense, but he was also role modeling a lack of common sense and thoughtfulness for others. And so if we can almost reimagine how we value people in a digital world, perhaps we can get back to common sense by first reading Ministry of Common Sense, but we can also understand that we have digital body language behaviors and that these behaviors can allow us to deepen empathy regardless of distance.
Now, let me just share with you a little video, which I'm sure you're familiar with, done from Harvard University, which is about the lack of empathy between a mother and its daughter. And I find it's really fascinating. It's 2 minutes long. Take a look at this somewhat scary and disturbing
Babies
video.
this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In this still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, come on, why aren't we doing this? Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
I don't need to tell you, this is a very disturbing video, right? Because what we're seeing here is how no facial movements at all is removing empathy completely. And one of the hypotheses I have, which I would love to hear your view on, is we've seen multiple papers being published over the last 3 years. The more you use Botox, the less micro movements you have in your face, the more you are challenged by creating empathy with other people because they can't read those micro movements. And that's part of a body language as well. Give me a sense of what your view is on this topic, because I know that empathy and screen-based communication is tricky because you can't read all those micro movements. They're kind of frozen somehow, right?
Absolutely. The head nod, the handshake, the direct eye contact, the stern eye, the furrowed brows, the shoulders up, the hunched arms tightened. These are all cues that made up roughly 50 to 70% of communication. Most of those are pretty much erased, especially even in video meetings. In the world of screen freezes, echoes, delays, the fact that it's not natural that we are seeing our video on the screen, looking at ourselves while trying to look at other people, we are missing or misreading many cues. We may misread a pause on the internet with a screen freeze mentally as someone lacking a share of empathy with us, but that could just be technology. And so in many ways, we are being challenged to flex our muscles in new ways. And I'd argue use different mediums and new ways to think about deepening empathy. So for example, the chat tool, and everyone's sharing on LinkedIn right now and other tools, thank you so much, because it's deepening our ways of engaging given the challenges of empathy behind a screen. And then also, Martin, I'm going to give you a shout out, the use of video, the use of other mediums of communication where we can zoom in and zoom out is also creating more connection because it's activating our minds in different ways.
I just want to give a shout out to a lot of the viewers around the world. Send a note right now and say where you're from. Hello, everyone from across the world. I want to say hello to Julian, to Jory, and to Sanjay, which all is saying hello. Now, it's fascinating, isn't it, this topic? And I just want to move on with one single comment on that topic, which is, frankly, I sometimes have conversations with people where I don't want to say this on a Zoom call. I want to have these private conversation where I say to them, listen, I think we come across each other. I think there's an issue here. I think, do you know what? Can you just give it, take a little bit, and then we come to an agreement? That is super difficult for me to express on a Zoom call. It's almost like you feel someone is listening in, or you feel you're on the record, or you feel that, that moment late night after a drink in a bar where you sneak in that line without it being too serious, but then on the other hand, it has a meaning. How do you navigate that? Because that's kind of gone, right?
It is. It's much more difficult than ever. I think, how do we navigate that water cooler effect? How do we replace that water cooler effect? Well, I think it starts with a few key things. The first is, number one, choose the right channel. So think about not just your digital body language style and how you like to connect with others behind a screen, whether it's hopping on the phone or being on Zoom or texting. Some people are texters and not phone call people. Think about what will best serve the other person. What's their digital body language style? What will resonate with them? I know 50-year-old executives where if I send them an email, they'll never read it. If I send a text, I'll get a response in 3 minutes. And then there's other leaders or managers that say, I do not want another Zoom call. Actually, just call me. I want to get on the phone and talk to you and chat and not be worried because I'm an introvert. I want to look around and not be worried about my body language. And I'll be able to deepen my connection with you. Many people are saying it's like freedom. So number one, choosing the right channel. And then two, have fun, like break down barriers. I like to say, start a meeting with some type of icebreaker, asking everyone to share something they're proud of, a win of the week, something that happened at their home, one fun thing they love about their remote desk. So whatever it is, like for me, it's my coffee right here, whatever it might be, to break down those barriers to connect.
Now, creativity along with empathy and common sense seems to be at a free fall during COVID-19. Some years ago, I think in 2015, you introduced the concept of connectional, is it pronounced right? Connectional intelligence. How can this way of thinking help us to overcome the challenge of creativity somewhat being in a crisis?
So how can we use connectional intelligence to enhance creativity and empathy? I have lots of examples and stories to share, and I'll start with one example that will bring your question to life. So a few years ago, there was a team at Colgate-Palmolive, a toothpaste company, and this team of chemists were trying to figure out a fluoride issue that they couldn't figure it out. They were working on it for months. It was costing a lot of money. Finally, one team member said, why don't we ask a different network? And they posted this problem on a community website called Innocentive, which is a community of scientists who come together to solve scientific issues and who have a curiosity around science. And within a few days, a physicist solved the problem because he let them know it wasn't a chemistry problem. It was a physics problem. It was about charged particles. Colgate and the team learned a few things. The first thing they learned is that they didn't even dare to ask the physicists at their own company how to solve that problem because they had labeled it as a chemistry problem. And that physicist would have never been hired by the company. And so this is a great example of the power of connectional intelligence. In this moment of time when we're working remotely, we also have a unique opportunity to connect across silos. We can ask ourselves, who can help us solve this problem? And not just ask the same 5 experts in our company, but broaden it to partners, competitors, other silos, new people, students, candidates, to help us reimagine solutions to work faster and better than we ever would have imagined. So connectional intelligence can actually help us right now enhance creativity, get better ideas, and enhance our empathy by connecting in cohorts with people that we may not have been in touch with day to day.
And Sebastian, by the way, I want to give him a shout out because he's saying empathy I build by calling people randomly out of the blue and just ask them how they're doing. I mean, if I would have said that 10 years ago, people would say, well, that was kind of, yeah, okay, well, I'm doing that all the time. But we don't do that anymore because we're so scheduled, right? Which is crazy. I just want to come back to one fascinating observation you made a couple of years ago coming out of Australia and out of the UK was called Granny Cloud, right? Yeah. And that whole philosophy, because what it shows is, again, 2 different points of view combined really create creativity. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so the Granny Cloud is a community of thousands of grandmothers around the world that connect on video Skype and mentor and tutor children across India and now other developing countries to help them practice English and coursework, especially when teachers can't be present. And this all began with an experiment where one professor put kiosks in slum villages with internet access to see what would happen if the children had access to internet. And obviously they were going online, they were on YouTube, they were trying to learn English. And a group of grandmothers said, how can we help? And the typical response would have been, well, donate money so we can buy more kiosks. But these grannies use their connectional intelligence and they said, how can we use our wisdom, our know-how, our available time? And today, not only is it thousands of grandmothers, research is actually showing that the interaction that these grandmothers are having is helping them to increase their cognitive ability as they decline in age. So it's also being considered as a model for senior centers and retirement centers around how to engage elder populations. So think about all the different ways we can connect networks that may be idle, that may be home alone, that may be available right now to solve problems, to connect in ways we never thought before. It all starts with the Ministry of Common Sense.
Well, I guess it does, because this is common sense, right? I mean, it reminds me a little bit about the millennials and their approach on how to solve problems and override existing structures. and which is fueled by a completely new way of thinking, where common sense approaches is happening. Share with me one of your stories about a law firm and how their millennials cracked the code of collaboration.
A leading firm noticed that the CFO actually noticed that the youngest associates were billing less hours than ever before. And this was odd because they were giving them more work, not less work. When they dug into it, they discovered that these associates had created their own Twitter-type network to help each other solve cases faster, well pre-pandemic. And it was actually helping them work more effectively outside of clunky meetings and emails. It was sort of a cohort chain to share, I have this resource, or I can't find this, where can I find it, across offices, across practices, and beyond. And the senior leaders realized that not only could they work more effectively, but that there were so many other peer-to-peer networks that were being under-leveraged across the organization. For example, senior partners dealing on client deals where they could share expertise, new employees at all levels of the organization, individuals with unique expertise or passions around new industries that the firm was trying to sell into. And so really this example just shows that the ways that we connect and thinking about the diversity of our connections can allow us to grow empathy, grow creativity in this time of change.
What an amazing story. I mean, what I'm thinking about here is, of course, the challenge of how do you come up with these ideas. And I think where you're thinking and my thinking is very aligned is with what you call your 5 C's, where curiosity, to broaden your perspective, really is the way to go, where you see things from a different perspective. Like, for example, how Ron Valleys, your friend, was growing pumpkins, and where he created the largest pumpkin in the world, double the size of other pumpkins, because he managed to team up with potato growers. Is that right?
That's right. Ron Wallace had a passion. It was to grow the world's largest pumpkin. And ladies and gentlemen, he did. He grew a 1-ton pumpkin. That's 2,000 pounds. And he just had a passion around this. So he started over 30 years to read about pumpkin growing. But then he said, I need to connect in different ways rather than sitting on my farm. So he started to read science journals and study what was allowing certain crops to radically grow. And he read a study around a certain fungi that was radically growing the size of potatoes. And he dug into it. He talked to farmers, he talked to scientists, and he was the first one to try it with pumpkins. It radically grew the size of pumpkins. And he created an association where other pumpkin farmers were sharing this. There was actually something called the world's largest pumpkin competition in Rhode Island every year in the United States, and he won it. And he really attributes it to connecting across silos, adjacencies, and looking beyond the usual suspects. And in many ways, this is common sense too. And so the more that we can start common sense with curiosity of not just how can I solve this problem myself, but who can help? And how can I design my questions to think about those that I never would have imagined to help, to engage in helping me solve this problem?
Fascinating stuff. It reminds me a lot about some of the work we've done for Maersk, which is the largest shipping company in the world with 21% trade. And one of the things we were struggling with was, how is this organization going to evolve? But also, most importantly, how do you make people internally realize that, in fact, they have to see the world differently and adopt to new changes? And, you know, when you've been around for so long time as Maersk, which invented the concept of container shipping, you, of course, see the world from one point of view, which is rather fixed, right? I would almost say like a square thing, right? And what was fascinating was we did an experiment. This is something I would recommend everyone to do out there. We did an experiment where we literally said to people, hey, instead of you trying to force yourself to see things from a different point of view, try to simulate a thought process. And the thought process is very simple. You basically take the company you admire the most, and it should not be a company within the industry. This should be outside your industry, right? And what you do now is that you say, well, what if that company actually was bought by you? And what would happen? And the answer would be, oh, you know, they probably would start to dilute their services. I mean, imagine Maersk was buying Amazon. Suddenly all these sleek concepts online will disappear and one-click service will disappear, all that stuff. And what happened through that process of simulation was that they realized how stuck in a way of mindset they were. And then, of course, when you flip the table and saying, what would happen if company X, in this case, it actually was Uber, is buying Maersk, then suddenly they saw all these different amazing opportunities. So the exchange of empathy through the mindset ideation process actually helped them to change their point of view. Do you share that type of thinking?
Absolutely. And I think the challenge for all of those listening right now is, first, if you haven't pre-order or order now Martin's book, because I think you're bringing to light how we can all do this immediately now. And secondly, I think I would challenge everyone to think about, how can you use connectional intelligence to get your big things done this year? So start with, I call it the 5 C's. Number 1, curiosity. Who can help you solve the big things? What's the big thing you want to get done first? But who can help you solve that problem, and how could you engage them? The second C is courage. How can you take risks? Maybe reach out to people you never would have imagined, competitors, to share information and best practice. Those from a completely different perspective, someone you've never emailed before. Third is combination. Once you've had those connections, how could you combine them, as you say, Martin, in new and different ways to identify new solutions like Granny Cloud, like Colgate, like the law firm? The fourth one is we have curiosity, courage, combination, and then community. So thinking about your communities. What are all the communities you're a part of? Are you a part of a family community? Are you part of a neighbor community? Are you part of work community? And how could you break down those communities to bring different types of expertise together? And then the last C I call combustion, which is, once you've connected and used curiosity and courage and communities, how can you allow it to combust and get your big thing done? And I believe we can all harness this if we use our common sense. And especially right now, we have a unique opportunity to think beyond the office and think about anyone, anywhere, to connect intelligently.
I love your structure. Now, Royal is asking us about a simple question. He's saying, with long distance, we also have long distance relationship happening. How do you maintain a long distance relationship due to this technology invention, yet also the challenges of saying I love you when there's only a wireless cable between us?
It's interesting because I think for some, it's like distance makes the heart grow fonder. In some ways, long distance relationships are deeply challenged, right, through this time. And it's also causing us, with those constraints of not being face-to-face, to be more creative around how we deepen engagement. And so this moment is allowing us to ask new questions that will allow us to have better relationships in the future when we're face-to-face and digital. For example, how can we reimagine the date night while virtual? So instead of what me and my husband did years ago when we were long distance, ordering some food and I'm eating and looking down and maybe talking to him on FaceTime, we could design an experience. We could go to a virtual magic show together and laugh. We could cook something together and eat it together and ask each other fun questions or play an online game together. We could use this time to read books together or read something together and talk about it. So those are just some examples. I'm definitely not a relationship expert, but what I would say is I'd encourage us to use the power of this constraint in long distance relationships or long distance work relationships to be imaginative around what we could do that might actually allow us to learn more about each other that we don't get in the rush of the pace-to-pace normal life.
Well, it's been such a pleasure talking with you. I really wish we had more time, but I just want to give everyone watching a chance to connect with you, Erica. Where can people get hold of you?
Well, I am so honored to be here, Martin, and I'm so excited just to spread the Ministry of Common Sense because we all need it desperately. And if you want to learn more about me, I am at ericadhawan.com. You can check out my website. And once you've read Martin's book first, if you want to learn more, check out my new book already on Amazon called Digital Body Language. once you've read Common Sense, because it'll be a great follow-up after Martin's amazing book.
I actually do think you're right. I mean, it's just amazing how aligned we are around all this, really. Listen, thank you so much. It really has been an honor and pleasure to have you on the show. I'm sure we'll catch up again somewhere in cyberspace, and when COVID decides to disappear, also in reality. Now, here's the good news. When we are catching up again tomorrow, I have Rita McGrath on the show. Rita McGrath is also a Thinkers 50. She is the 5th highest ranking person in terms of thinking within the business community in the world. So she really knows her stuff very well. A wonderful individual and a person I think everyone can be inspired from. So see you again tomorrow. It is at 7 p.m. Central European time. And if I do my math right, there'll be 1 p.m. Eastern time. And it probably would be something around, I would say, 10 a.m. Pacific time. So see you tomorrow. Take care, everyone. Bye for now. Thank you.